Let's welcome Tanya DePass and B. Dave Walters back to Dragon Talk. Yeah! Oh my
goodness! I just want you to know my dog's tail just started wagging when you were announced. He's also
that.
A huge fan.
You know, I am also a fan of the Shelly Hound. Yes.
His name is Puppy.
Just that's it. You let your kids name the dog, didn't you?
Clearly someone else's kid named the dog. When we adopted him, that's the name he came with. That's the name he answers to. It totally works though, because whenever people see him on a walk, they always go, "Oh, hi, Puppy," because isn't that how you address all dogs that you don't know? So he thinks like everybody knows me. Everybody knows my name. It's like walking into Cheers.
I got people out in these streets. Yeah, no, that's good. It's good for the dog's self-esteem. 100%. Yeah.
Totally.
No.
So excited to have both of you back on. You're multiple times for both of you. I think this might be the third appearance for both of you, but not at the same time, right?
No, we've never been on together.
Yeah, this is at least number 3 for me, which is great. And yes, never been able to be on the same time as Tanya, so it's win-win. You know, I'm leveling up now. I'm like I got into the adventure. Now I'm getting high-level party members with me in the adventure. Yes.
And the two of you are working and starring in Black Dice Society, an amazing weekly show that. Oh yeah, and you've got it on the shirt there.
Apparel.
The seamless product placement where I'm like, oh yes, it's a delightful show. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Your mug game is strong, both in the actual physical mugs and your facial expressions.
My mug on a mug, and it's my mug on a mug. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm.
Mug on a mug.
I learned it from you, Greg Tito. I learned it from you.
Always
be branding.
Merchandising.
Always be putting your mug on a mug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Black Dice Society's been on the D&D Twitch channel for the last 6 weeks, I think, right?
This is, as of the time of this recording, episode 8 is tomorrow.
Yeah. Wow. So 2
Time
months.
Flies.
Getting people excited about all the horror storytelling in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which is out now. People are able to play and do it now, but you guys got to show off some of the amazing horror-ific content within that, right?
That is true.
Oh, yeah.
That is true. I would like to say one thing before we dive too deeply into this, because this is also a special occasion. This is 3 years to the day when I met Tanya, 3 years to the day when I met Shelly in person, and you as well in person, Greg. We talked before that. Stream of Many Eyes 3 years ago was going on.
Is that true,
God.
man?
This would have been day 2 of it. Like yesterday was... yesterday was day 1. This would have been day 2, because all of the pictures are coming up of like 3 years ago, and it was Jim Zub's birthday yesterday because he played Minsk that day.
Right.
So
and he shaved his head. I remember he really went in for the bit.
Yep, he shaved his head for it. That is true. Yep. So that's all. Yeah, it's a special occasion. So literally started from the bottom. Now we're here. Exactly.
Aw, I love that so much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's true. That's when Rivals of Waterdeep first debuted on the D&D stage there. And you, Dave, you were on the off the table section, which we called it, with Ivan Van Norman and Kate Welch and so many other awesome folks.
Yep, and we did. And I DM'd a game there. Yeah, and we did all that stuff. So yeah, that was all true. So this is the part in the conversation where I would be remiss if I didn't say none of this would have happened without Greg Tito. Shout out to my homie Greg Tito for bringing us in that day, making all that possible, making all this other stuff possible. All goes on your tab, sir. All goes on your tab.
And Rivals, and bring me on Dragon Talk to begin with, and getting me back into D&D, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh, you got you back into D&D.
We talked about Dragon Age and all that fun stuff. Yeah. And I think you were reluctant to come on too, because you're like, nah, I don't know about this D&D thing.
Well, it was like, do I want to like be the nerdy, like do the nerdy thing, and are people gonna like nerd check me? And then I've told this story before that I didn't realize it was like the official D&D podcast until like.
Do you think it was just like Greg, just like, hey, I got this podcast.
I thought it was just Greg, like he was. I knew he worked for Wizards. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. We get to talk D&D, and I get to learn more about Greg. And then it was like, oh, it's the For Really Real D&D podcast. then I was like, well, we're here now. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, Greg set me back on the path to rolling D20s and got me all the books, because I think 5th edition had just come out when I was on the show the first time.
It was new, right? Yeah, it was, or I think maybe even Curse of Strahd had just come out too. Like it was that spring of 2016 or 2015. Yeah, it was early on in the 5th edition cycle.
Yep.
And now look at us all grown up doing Ravenloft.
Deeply into the D and the D now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all better for it.
Yes,
So,
thank you for the dungeons and additionally the dragons. Yeah, it's I guess for the people who don't know, Black Dice Society, I'm DMing. Tanya is one of the players on there. It is the official D&D Ravenloft horror stream. And again, we're episode 8's coming up. The first 7 are on D&D YouTube. It's live on YouTube and Twitch at 4 Pacific on Thursdays. Check it out. Come join us if you like, being existentially tormented. And who doesn't?
Do you like it, Tanya?
Like, I've met
Tanya
you,
may
sir.
object. Oh, he's got the evil DM laugh.
Oh, yeah, that guy got my evil laugh out of me. That's true.
But you know what? If I didn't trust Dave, I wouldn't come back. I wouldn't have said yes.
I obviously trust is a big part when you're playing a horror campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. We had that's one of the things I like most about this book is it very much has a lot of the consent tools and safety tools in it, and we had a lot of conversations up front with the cast of like, what are your no-go areas, because again, horror content by definition deals with things that might be uncomfortable. And so I had to find out, the lines and veils of the individual cast, like who's, okay with what. And we have our systems in place that if somebody gets squeaked out by something, we can, deal with it right then and adjust and move. Because I've had that happen. I've had people when we were doing Heroes of the Plains, I won't say who it was, but there was a monster that just had a lot of teeth. For whatever reason, teeth was like very much a descriptor. And one of the cast was just like, no, I can't do that, actually. Like, I didn't know I couldn't do it, but now we're here and I can't do that. And we're like, okay, we'll adjust. So, yeah, that kind of comes with the more intense content, I think. But it's, but I think by the same token, though, I think when you start kind of getting down in some of that stuff, you can have a really ultimately emotionally fulfilling experience. It's more thrilling. The highs are higher and the lows are lower. So, at least I think so.
Has that been true, Tanya? How's it been from your end as the player?
It's been really interesting because I'd never touched Ravenloft. I hadn't touched any of the darker content previously. So I was getting to learn about it, and also just I get to be a little darker of a character than I do, let's say, on Rivals or anything else that I've been doing. So not only do I get to play D&D every week with people I really like, I get to kind of go on the darker path, which I never get to do. And I get to, Greg and I have talked about this, how my feelings about the Drow, and getting to be a Drow and a Dhampir and a Bloodhunter. I'm forcing myself and challenging myself to try things that are normally way outside my comfort zone.
Mm.
What's that like? So I want to ask about your character, because I think Ravenloft has just so many really exciting things that you can do with character creation in it. So I'm curious how you came to be the Drow Dhampir Bloodhunter, but also what is it like to go out of your comfort zone as a player? Because I don't think I do that very often, and I would like to.
It's outside my comfort zone because, Selise is a paladin. Well, at least until the last 2 seasons, she was very much paladin, not lawful good, but, more or less moral and upright. And then, now she's partially a blood hunter. And I feel a way about the Drow and the way that people play them and kind of the weird, to me, weird ways in which people almost like revere the darkness of Lolth and what they think the Drow are, and the whole they're pitch black up until this edition. And I always felt a way about them. I actually kind of hated Drow, and I was like, let me see if I can do this, especially with the changes in 5e. And then I was like, not quite sure I want to be a vampire because I'm not sure how that would affect me in terms of us adventuring. And am I going to be a character that is going to suffer every time we're out in the daylight wherever we go? So Dhampir was a good kind of, I still have these otherworldly powers, but I'm not truly undead. I'm kind of undead. And then I just really like the Bloodhunter class. It lets me kind of play around with blood magic, but in the service of, at least for me, the neutral or neutral good. So it's like I just get to basically flip Selise over and see what's under the rock and go for it.
I like that idea of under the rock.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there's dark crawly things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's what we're doing today.
I've been fortunate enough to be doing this now long enough that I've played so many things that it's my guiding principles now are kind of what haven't I done. In a lot of times, the next big character is the direct opposite of the previous character. Like when I created Freely originally, which is my character that I play on Heroes of the Plains and my most popular D&D character, we were still neck deep in LA by night. Mm-hmm. So Freely was expressly created to be not Victor, expressly. Like that's why he's small. That's why I played one of the small folk. Int is his dump stat. He's not a planner. He's not a thinker. He's a halfling of action. He just straightforward and just does what he thinks is right. Because all of those things are what Victor isn't. Because when I noticed certain through lines kept coming up in every character, like they ended up being like the talky party face person. That would be the like I won't necessarily shoot first, but I will shoot last type thing. And I realized a lot of those things were the parts of me that I was unintentionally bringing to every character. So then it became a conscious effort to play something other than that, to get outside your comfort zone.
That's amazing. Thinking about how both of you have been doing this for a long time, 3-4 years at this point. You're mentioning Victor was the Vampire the Masquerade character, and Selise from Rivals of Waterdeep, and then having this cast come together from different parts of the D&D fandom. They've also have their own experiences and done things like this. So how has that changed with all that experience, the production of something like this? Because it's not live, right? You guys
it is live. It's live.
No, we're live.
No, we're live.
My bad.
We taped some epilogue content that is pre-taped, but the show you see at 4:00 is happening before you. Yeah.
Yes, but how has that informed this new iteration so that all that experience of doing this for so many years, like I feel like you've got the veterans doing this and that elevates it.
100%. One quick thing before I go on too far. Rivals of Waterdeep Sunday mornings on D&D Twitch. We didn't say that straight up. Season 10, it's live now.
Always depend on Dave to get the.
I know. I was just like, I was going to get there.
Always be Brandon.
Yeah.
That's Victor right there. That's Victor talking. I think
that's the part that's me. That's in all of them. Yeah. No, I was very fortunate. Everybody I wanted for the show all said yes. It was a miracle that 4:00 Thursday is literally the only time out of the 7-day week that we're all available. Getting everybody together for other stuff has proven nearly impossible. So it was just meant to be.
That's the Dark Lord of D&D.
It was.
The scheduling.
It was. The dark powers maneuvering us into position. When Watsy approached me about doing this, because we'd been in talks about doing something else after A Darkened Wish ended, and I'd put a couple of ideas out to them, and they came back to me with like, well, word is you play and run a little bit of vampire. How about Ravenloft? And I was like, okay. And got off the phone, and the first call I made was to Mark Meir. I called him right then because like Ravenloft is his jam. Like he loves Ravenloft. And then it was just shotgun. I'd basically like mass texted everybody that day, and I had the whole cast locked down within like an hour or two.
Wow.
And we were in production for a long time. We started talking it through in like December, and we went up in April. We went up in April, didn't we? That 8 weeks? Yeah.
April 1st, not an April Fool's joke.
Because we kept having to tell people this isn't a joke. We're really doing this. Yeah, Thursday, April 1st. You're right. Yeah. And I had a cast that I knew would be able to like really bring some depth in subtext to it. And I just tried to pound from the beginning that this isn't going to be like most D&D streams, where for the most part, you know, D&D has a presumption of success. You come around the corner and you see an ogre, you can take the ogre for the most part. You know, I mean, the dice might betray you, but you're confronted with enemies that are always punching in your weight class. I was like, this isn't gonna be like that. Like, there's gonna be things you should run from. We're going to start at level 1 for that exact reason, so that everybody's kind of on their heels all the time and having to find their way through things. And the original plan for the show was almost a deluxe monster of the week-ish type thing, where it's like you guys will come to a domain, something's wrong, you know, the Wolfman's killing villagers. You'll take a couple episodes to deal with the Wolfman and then leave, you know, 3 or 4 episode arcs. And then I actually got my hands on the book and I realized there was so much in every domain that we'd be doing the content a disservice to try and just hit and run everywhere. And then the idea very much sort of like morphed into a more overarching concept of roughly where they're going. And it takes as long as it takes. And I also told them, you know, one of the things about Ravenloft is each of the Dread domains has certain conditions under which you can come in and certain conditions under which you can leave. If you guys go somewhere and I paint this picture of what's going on and y'all are like, yeah, nah, we're leaving right now, and you can, you know, like, I'm not gonna stop you. So it's been really interesting. But now, just this past Saturday, we taped, I think, 12 pieces of epilogue content. Ooh. So that's sort of kind of going to drive some posts into the ground now of sort of a framework of where things kind of need to go. Yeah, it's been great. And like you said, having people that I knew were experienced players, having people that I knew were experienced performers, once everybody got the tone that basically was be terrible because the mists don't trap good people, everything else fell into place.
Wait, tell me about the mist doesn't trap good people. Is this a fact that I've always missed? Oh, well, no pun intended.
Curse Strahd, you know, you can get kind of swept away and you like do what you do and got to get out of there. But I mean, for the most part, if the mist beckon, you kind of deserve to be there.
I'm a bad person.
Yeah. I mean, Fen has some things that haven't come up yet, or things that I want to do that, you know, as of yet haven't come up. But even just the introduction, because the fun thing we did, if you're not caught up on Black Dice Society, but Dave ran with it, sparked it, and then I ran with it, that my character and Isolde, who is a canon character, were together. We didn't plan it at all. It just was like in the moment, the way that we were interacting as him as Isolde and me as Fen, and we just ran with it. And everybody's like, "Did you plan that?" We're like, "Nope."
Oh, those are the best.
Not in the least.
That's the great moments, right? Where it's the mixture between all the planning and plotting that you can do, and then just like, all right, well, this just happened, and it feels right for everybody at the table, and let's go with it. And that's the push and pull of such a show like this.
Although part of that, if I'm being honest with you, is when I got the book, I looked at the Isolde fan art and I was like, that's Tanya's jam.
Dave out here exposed me, but he's known me long enough. He knows my type.
I was like, yeah, she won't holler at that. Yeah, okay. Let's see where this goes. Yeah. That's true.
And he ran with it. And it's, for me at least, you know, I've gotten to play with DJ. We did that 2-shot for QuakeCon where, without even trying, we meshed our characters, and he was kind of Desmond-y. But you know, his character was night because DJ night, and I was like, fine, then my character is day, night and day, and we just ran with it. And the same thing is kind of happening with Black Dice, because we're good friends in real life, so a lot of that comes out in our in-character interactions. And you know, same with Mark. You know, Mark is one of my favorite people, And, I put aside oh my God, it's Mark. He's Commander Shepard. Like, he's just like my nerdy D&D buddy. So, but we actually came up with a backstory where our characters are linked. So, and then we just kind of ran with it.
Super fun. So, Tanya, question for you, because you've been, now you've known a lot of the people that you're in the group with. Dave, you had a method to your madness for putting this group together, but have you played D&D with these people before, Tanya? And what is it like to just, step into this new group, completely new setting, and like you're saying, totally different than what you do with Rivals? What was that like?
Well, it's interesting because I've played RPGs with DJ, but not D&D up until now. I've not had the chance to sit down with Mark at a table. And actually, other than Dave, I hadn't played D&D with anyone else in the group before, and Dave's the DM. So it was just like, how are we going to mesh? And the thing is, I know Mark, I know DJ, but I didn't know Sage and Becca very well at all. So it's just like new people, hopefully it works out. But since we're all adults and good performers and professionals, we actually sat down and did a session 0 and we talked through everything. And we got on Zoom and said, this is what I'm trying to do. Here's my character. And the key of many good D&D campaigns, which a lot of people seem to forget, is communication. Without that communication, we could have showed up for the first episode and been like, cool, here's my character. She likes to murder people. And then who knows where we would have been.
Yeah. That communication is really key. And I love that that's a through line through Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft as well, that you have to have that open dialogue, not only about the terribleness that can befall your character, but just how to draw out the things that are horrible too. There needs to be, you can't just be like, oh, I'm murdering things and that's horror. You have to find some way the things that are not necessarily scary to the audience or to the players, but something that that people are going to be uncomfortable with, but not too uncomfortable with. And that's a really hard, or can be a really hard thing to find unless you're communicating with your players as often as you are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Horror, ironically enough, requires a sense of safety.
Yeah.
Like you have to feel okay to sort of let yourself go and explore some things and experience some things. Because if you're too caught up in your own head or too guarded, you can't experience the emotional vulnerability that makes the medium work.
Yeah.
And you can only have that when you know that everyone at the table is coming from a place of good intentions, that everyone is trying to set everyone else up for success. And yeah, we're telling a twisty, terrible story, but we're telling a twisty, terrible story together. And it's funny, I wish a lot of times people could see the our Zoom chat, because it's nothing but check-ins. That's all the Zoom chat is, especially when they bicker with each other. It's like, oh my God, I love you. Are you okay? That's what's going by. On the screen, you're not the boss of me. And then oh my God, I love you.
Just kidding.
Yeah, right. Okay, hearts. Yeah, but that's important, because it's bleed is real.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know what that means, but I know a lot of people, that's a new term for them.
Sure.
So that is extremely important for this book and for this show in particular.
Sure. Yeah. You hear it referred to as bleed or character bleed, where it's just the things that are happening to your character start to affect your real human emotions. When ideally those things are connected, of course, but they're relatively siloed. Somebody being mad at my character doesn't mean they're mad at me. But that can be difficult to parse sometimes, especially, over Zoom, when you're not necessarily there in the room to feel someone's energy is challenging. It's a time right now when everyone is still kind of existentially, emotionally exhausted. So we're all a little worn when we clock in, just because the world is right now, due to motions broadly at everything. And then, you sit down to do something that's fun, and then, your character loses an arm. Or the group yells at you for making a mistake or something, and it's easy to have your human people feelings, be agitated by that. And that's why check-ins are powerful, to make sure that that's not what's happening, to give proper reassurance. And just make sure everything's okay, because even when it is okay, it's even good to know somebody checked on you. I'm like, hey, you're all right? Yeah, I'm all right. But, but thanks for caring, versus just kind of like, putting a cigarette out on somebody's forehead. Yeah.
Well, especially because a lot of us are new to playing together, even if we're not new to playing the game.
Yeah.
We're sitting here and like my character was ready to like pull out her sword on one of the other characters because things were going wild. And it's like, I don't actually mean this. I think Paige even like in advance was like, I'm about to be terrible. I don't mean this. This is just my character. But again, we're all professionals, and we have a very ongoing Twitter DM. So if anything's going on or something's happening, we can kind of check in. And then when we're pre-show and live, just like how we're chatting, there is that chat right there. So you can see, even if you can't like sneakily type because keyboards are loud.
Damn those mechanical keyboards.
Right? Like get the soft keys, all the soft keys. But I think over these 2 months, and even in the planning stage, like we've all just kind of checked in. None of us came into this with the idea of I'm coming into this to be the jackass. I'm not trying to be the asshole. Yeah. My character might be, and that's their backstory. But I, as a person sitting at a table with you every week, we're telling the best story we can, and facilitated by the 7 of us all together. And the audience, with the investment in our characters and already shipping characters, which is a little weird for me being on the other side of the camera, but it is what it is. And, I don't, and Dave know, and you all know, I don't say this lightly, but it's a pleasure and an honor to get to do this. Cause who would have thought even 5 years ago, this would be my life,
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. And go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to, especially through this time when we're all separate, right? Like I think, like you were saying, when we came together for D&D Live, I mean, there was this certain amount of camaraderie that can be felt about being at the same location and having those check-ins, as you're saying, and to be able to see the type of shows that you guys are making flourish, as well as how everyone is now engaging with Dungeons and Dragons, at least in the quarantine world. I think it's done a lot of good for people. Like that communication. Oh, yeah. Having a focal point each week, if you play each week for D&D groups out there, has been a huge amount of just buoyancy to everyone's spirit who is in this fandom right now.
Yeah, something to look forward to, still a sense of connectedness. I mean, and if you think about it retroactively, it makes sense, because the whole point of this medium is you go on an adventure with your friends, it's always been in your head. It's just before now, we were all kind of in the room together in our heads. Now it's like, okay, we're a little further away, but it's still that feeling of, going on a trip with your friends.
Yeah. And sometimes you need the artifice of like, well, we're playing this game, we're doing a story together, but it's not really even about that. It's about, the way I'm hearing about you guys communicate with each other and checking in and making feel like everyone's okay. Gosh, that's what's great about people in general, right? That's all relationships out there.
That's true.
That is true. And it's like, the more I hear people talk about employing safety tools in their games and all the check-ins, it's like, gosh, we should really be doing more of that in our real life too. But we seem like we take care of each other better in like the confines of role-playing games sometimes. But, how often do you really check in with, you might think like, oh, I should text this person. And then you forget over the course of your day or something. But it's always top of mind, especially in a campaign like what you're doing here. So that should bleed. That's the kind of bleed we need in our real life. Yes.
Positive crossover.
Definitely. Question: Did you do character creation together, or did you come to that session 0 with your characters already created? And I asked just because I imagine, again, Ravenloft gives you lots of good tools for our backstory, even just those lineages alone. It's like, how did you become this reborn character?
They all came up with I'll let Tanya speak to her experience, of course. But I will say the only person I made any request of was Mark, because I was like, the group probably needs a cleric. You should come to Ravenloft with a cleric. Everyone else, I was like, do literally whatever. And a lot of them were like, well, but if they're playing a sorcerer, I don't want to play a sorcerer. I was like, you guys can play 6 sorcerers. Like, it's not whatever you want to do, because hopefully this is going to be something we do for some time. These are, you're going to live in these character skins for a while. So it needs to be the thing that you feel like you can embody and get lost in. And whether or not this person thinks that also is kind of irrelevant. So.
Right. Are you also providing some of those lines and veils, though? Like, did you know going forward, like when you're thinking about your characters and their backstories, and stay away from these types of things? Because I imagine like that could be triggering too for a player if you don't.
The only thing is, I was like, understand this will not be a jokey game. Okay. This is not the dad joke, that's what she said game. Because mistimed humor dissipates tension, and tension is vital to horror. So there was one person in particular who I will not bust out that was like, I cannot stay serious for 3 hours. It is not in me. Like I do not have the capacity. So I work with them to put together a character that would be kind of the Tasselhawk Burfoot, the eternal optimist. That no matter how terrible things were going, they would always be the like, yeah, but the birds are still singing type thing, and then I'm like, it's part of the character. But then we got there, day 1 hits, and that is not at all how the character showed up, which it happens. It's happened to me too, where you're like, I know exactly who this person is, and I'm talking, and that is not what I just said, and now there's something else,
I had a whole accent planned, and that's out the door.
Yeah, that's all not a thing anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so but beyond I guess those kind of 2 things, asking Mark to at least take some ranks in cleric, and the others be like, not be silly. Everything else was on the table. And the character concepts that you see, like Nora came up with the idea of a character that kept dying and kept coming back and didn't understand it before she knew what Reborn were.
Oh, wow.
That was just the idea she had. And I was like, do I have a lineage for you?
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, but I'll let Tanya talk about Finn. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I wanted something different. Like I said, I wanted to kind of challenge myself by getting into a drow, by getting into a bloodhunter. Sorry, oh God, that was gonna be such a terrible point. I was gonna say get a taste for a bloodhunter. I was like, oh, that's so bad. But with what I had already done with Selise, but she still has some ranks in paladin, fallen paladin as it is. But I want to be just straight up bloodhunter. Oh, you hurt me, I'm going to use your own body against you. And I was like, here's my idea. How does this work? Because my only confusion pre-seeing the book was, is Dhampir a race? Is it a lineage? Is it a condition? Because I wasn't sure if I picked Dhampir over vampire, like if I'm a vampire, is that my race? But now we know Dhampir is a lineage. So I'm still a drow, but I have the lineage of being a Dhampir. So now with the book out and D&D Beyond updated, I'm like, oh, okay, now it's finally clicking. Before it was all kind of, what does UA stand for? I always forget.
Unearthed Arcana.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I always look at it and it never sticks in my brain.
United Artists also.
That's true. Those United Artists were there with my character. But it never sticks. But I had UA stuff until D&D Beyond was updated. And it was like, does this work? Is it putting too much like dark viscous liquid in the pot, basically, of like tar, black ink, licorice, or does it work? And, I have this character that I've given this backstory. She still has her family, sort of, kind of. And, there's room for her to have a struggle. There's room for her to grow. But it's not so rigid of, I'm a Dhampir, I must bite people. I really don't have to. I just want to, because I'm just
fun.
It's right. It's like I have no reason to actually feed on people, but it's like this dude's annoying me. I'm just gonna feed on him. Why not? But yeah, it was
you can
fun.
only do in a Ravenloft game.
Yes, I mean, because Dave came up with like the Germanic nudist that we ran into in the forest.
Ja, alltså people of Del Monster, ja, det är sehr gut, ja.
Yeah. the monster, and he was annoying me so much, and I was like, and then things happened, and that wasn't an option. I was like, but he's right there. He's all sun-kissed skin and everything. I could like have a little nibble, and then I just didn't get a chance to have a snack, as it were. Not that I needed it. I know, right? And I was like, you never let me have fun.
Aw, just a little taste.
I mean, no spoilers, but you found out you wouldn't want to fet on that guy.
Right. I mean, later it was like, yeah, like, Fen is definitely an omnivore, put it that way. She likes red meat.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the difference too, I mean, even Rivals is set up in seasons, right? Where you have, here's someone who's going to dungeon master a story that will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's an overarching story. And you, Dave, I guess some of your experience has been in more shorter, contained. A Darkened Wish was like that, as well as some of your other projects. What's it like working with something that has no end, right? Like have like, you can have arcs and things fall and change, but this is something that will continue, hopefully, for as long as there's horrible stories to tell with this group.
Yeah, we are WotC's first ongoing stream that doesn't have any set season breaks. If the gods are kind, we'll keep going. Nothing can say that we don't get the call tomorrow that they're like, yeah, you don't get any more money, and then we're done. But theoretically,
we're not going to do that. That's crazy.
It's ongoing.
Got to keep that tension. That's what we
keep me on the edge of my seat too. Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a double-edged sword, because kind of my style is I just hurl sticks of dynamite and watch what happens. That's just what I like to do, and so I've put a lot of long-term payoff hooks in the story that I'm like, also those things now have to pay off. And like, based on just what the epilogues we shot in the things that we've already introduced, I have at least the rough beats of the narrative through the end of October, at least. Of like, at least they're gonna go this place and then this place and then this place. And, I estimate it'll take 2 to 3 episodes, but you never know. Because when we did A Darkened Wish, I thought when they went to Skullport and were dealing with the Mind Flayers, I literally thought that would take 3 episodes, and it ended up taking the entire season because it was interesting and it wasn't worth rushing, So it's like, well, let's just see where this goes. So I think a pet peeve of mine that I've experienced is oftentimes when you have an ongoing show, it's easy to waste a lot of time. Like, we're going to spend 3 hours talking to the shopkeep. And I don't mean like a planned obligatory shopping episode. I mean, stuff just takes too long. So I try to still like keep it moving because, we got a lot of episodes, but I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time, the time of the people at the table, the time of the people that are stopping to watch. And that's something that there was an article that came out that was 13 reasons why you should be watching the Black Dice Society. And one of them was there's no fluff, that it's like it's moving. And I'm like, perfect, because I try to give the character, like, since we have time, I try and give like the characters time for like Finn and Desmond to have a moment. And if it's, 15 minutes of the two of you interacting, but it's good, let's do it. We got the time for that. And I'll try to set them up in the sense that I'll let them know that I'm like, all right, this episode is going to be more story driven because next episode is going to be more fighty. So if there's like stuff that you want to get out that's like personal stuff, you should probably try and do it this week because next week you're kind of not going to get to that kind of thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the difference. I mean, that's something we talk about often, which is the difference between a performed show with people watching and your home game, right? Because a home game, you can waste 3 sessions shopping, and as long as everyone's having a good time, who cares? The pizza came, we're just going to stop for 3 hours. Oh, we never got to finish that session. It doesn't matter. But with something like this, where you have the buy-in, people's schedules are cleared, as well as viewers, I think it's really important to have that snappiness. But that's also going to be hard. And maybe I'll throw this to you, Tanya. That's got to be hard when you're like, but I have more I want to do and say. But Dave is trying to keep it moving, and you have to kind of internalize and not. I mean, that's probably a check-in moment more than anything else, right? Of like, Can I get to this later?
It can be, but I think so far we are, going into 8 episodes, we've hit our rhythm, I think, of in this moment, we're in a short rest, we're in a long rest. And, the way that Dave shifts between, okay, you like Fen and Desmond, you've taken up watch together and you've got this time. Do you want to do something? Or it's like, no, I'm going to sleep. Or, have this really sweet moment of, Fen was terrified, but she didn't want to admit it in front of anyone else. And we have that moment. For me, it's not so hard as a player. At least there's not been a moment yet where it's like, oh no, I really, really want to do this thing. But there's also why we have backstage chat of, hey, if we get a chance, I'd like to do X, Y, Z. And if we don't, oh well. Because I think I don't really want to say performer, because we've already had this is scripted moment in chat. And I'm like, I wish I had that kind of memory and time. But, as a player, whether it's, and I think whether it's an official D&D stream or you're sharing it on your channel, being cognizant of the time and the beats that you're hitting and not getting married to, I need to do this one thing. And we know some people, they get stuck on, well, I have to do this thing. If I don't do this thing, then this whole session was a waste. You literally can't do that, because you'll get stuck on, well, my character didn't get this thing. And that's when you start having that emotional bleed of, then there's the sulking and the annoyance of, well, so-and-so got to do whatever. Why did my character get to do whatever? And then as a DM, at least the season I DM for Rivals, I always went in with like 2 or 3 beats. I know I have 2 hours. And then based on what the players are doing and how the dice are going, I have to make that decision of, okay, we're at the 15-minute mark. I know we need to end. Where's that story beat gonna close out this time? And then where can we pick it up next time? And being okay with time skipping and saying, you know what, I would love to get to that. Maybe it can be additional content. We just can't get to it right now.
It's almost to trust the DM as director a little bit, right? Where you're like, all right, I might feel a little bit like, oh, I didn't get to do my moment, but I trust that, Dave as the expert DM can weave it in at some point later. Maybe not this session, but maybe next session.
Right. Or, and if there's like either a flashback or just kind of a, oh, hey, I noticed you were trying, like you didn't look okay when we were trying to rest in this, what we thought was a safe house. Do you want to talk about it? Because that can always be a way to give that player a moment later on by calling back to something that may have happened in a previous episode. And it's just, people think that it's very easy to do what we do. And this isn't like, oh, look at us, we're super special. But it's being on and on stage, the equivalent of doing that on Twitch and YouTube, is you're not just playing the game. It's not like we're just sitting around on Zoom and chit-chatting, and if somebody wanders off for 20 minutes, it's no big deal. It's, you got to hit story beats. And, the cold hard facts is there's a contract and there's money on the line if we're going to be mercenary about it.
So you got to be good.
Well, you got to be good, but also respectful of the fact that you're in a social contract, which you're in a literal contract to other people. So if I don't bring my A game, I'm doing a disservice, not just to myself, because I'm not doing the best I can do for the people that are tuning in, but for the people that are trusting me at the table, and Dave is our GM, to bring a good story and a good experience for those 3 hours every week.
Yeah. That's a lot of trust on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I remember once, this might seem an odd example, but it always stuck with me. When Vince McMahon, who owns the WWE, which was still the WWF even then, bought his main rival, WCW, people were like, well, you don't have any competition now. It's like, what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, we still have competition. Literally everything else a person can do.
Right.
Reading a book, going for a walk, going to the movies, talking to their family, we're competing with reality. So we still have to have something that makes people stop what they're doing and take this journey with us. And I always try to stay cognizant of that. Try not to waste anybody's time.
Life lessons from Vince McMahon. I didn't think we would have
Vinny
this
Mac,
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Not a place I thought we'd go.
I know, right?
And yet.
Yep.
There you go.
But it's a blessing to get to do this stuff. It's great to get to play these games, to be a part of these communities. Again, shout out to Greg Tito for literally making it possible.
Greggy! Yay.
You guys have done so. You know, like I said, I bump it up, and then you guys have been spiking it for 3 years at this point, right? Like, I think you've got it here. This is all you, and I love that too. That you are also in collaborating on this. You're also collaborating together on creating RPG content, right? Which just went live last week.
Yes. The Kickstarter for Into the Motherlands is live now. Check it out. It's a original sci-fi Afro-futuristic TTRPG that we're putting together. It was Tanya was the creative director. I'm the lead developer of the game. It's a great time. If you follow us on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen a number of tweets.
Yeah. I think a little discombobulated might be, at least for me. Dave's like, yeah, we got this. And I'm sitting here like,
Stairs.
Turns out Dave was right.
Dave was very right. The internet was like, we got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I was gonna. Do you think that playing together, as you know, in RPGs, has helped make you good collaborators on a professional level?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, because you learn how to communicate with people.
Yeah.
And everybody's got a different thing. There's some people that you just come straight over the plate. Like, that's how I want it. Like, I'm just give it to me. Say what you have to say. Other people, you have to really like soft sell it because they might be sensitive to criticism. Other people believe they're fantastic. Like we had one collaborator on the project that almost everybody we brought on got it immediately because we knew they were all pros. And one person just kept coming back with it, just stuff that just didn't fit. You know, like we're in 5-part harmony here. And, you're yodeling. We're like, no, just come over here. And that one person just never got their head around it, Yeah. And then there was a time that we just kind of had to talk and be like, well, maybe they're just not coming back for round 2. And that's fine. That happens.
And that's a hard skill to learn as a project manager, just being like, hey, look, this isn't necessarily a besmirch of your talent or anything, or the things you're bringing to it. It's just not the right fit for this band that we put together. Yeah. And communicating that in a way that doesn't feel like you're fired is tough. And I think the skill of dungeon mastering and having some of the bad news that you give to people on a weekly basis probably helps in that regard.
Yep.
Yeah. And I honed mine working in higher ed for 16 years.
Yeah.
Getting to talk to professors who have tenure and think nothing can ever touch them has taught me a lot of skills.
Oh, I bet.
And I also kept a bottle of whiskey at my desk. We called the drawer at 4. It wasn't just me, y'all. Don't think I was just being an alkie.
I knew people. It's crazy to think about teachers in high school who like literally had their drawers filled with cigarettes and things. Like, there was a different time.
Yeah.
I will say every collaboration's different, and a lot of the gaming collaborations I've been a part of have actually been very frustrating because a lot of times it's not clear what you're being asked to do. And you can waste literally weeks of time and come back with something. And it's like, oh, this isn't quite what we wanted. And it's like, yeah, but this is literally what you asked for. So when that happens, that's frustrating. So it's good to kind of be on the other side of the equation to be able to be like, no, this is what we want. But also because this is something completely new, we don't necessarily have, 20 or 30 years of brand identity that we're beholden to. There was just some like guiding principles, a lot of which were just, hey, what do you wish you'd seen when you were a little kid? Like given this in like thought exercises too, that it's like given, that we, kind of our inciting incident is we have these people that were taken from the 14th century to an alien planet. And this is now 2,000 years after that. Mm-hmm. Where would that go? Like, what would that look like? And then you start thinking about it, and then it's fun. You're like, well, I think this would happen. It's like dope.
That's why it's so, thank you, both of you, for coming on for my Star Trek podcast and talking through it. That's why it's been so great going back to Next Generation and watching some of those older episodes, because they, 30 years later now, it does feel like, oh, we're at these points where a lot of these lessons that were hitting new then are part of what is important now, and it's different, and you're feeling it in a different way. And I love that how fantasy and sci-fi can inform the way we think about our society and our entire existence. And it's something that is a super difficult thing to encapsulate, because you're like, why is this little game that we're playing on a weekly basis about horror? What does this mean for the world? But it does have impact to the audience, and to even just the two of you talking. It feels like it's enriched your relationships and your lives.
You're still making a statement, and for my money, artists shape society as much as anyone. Like, it's no coincidence that the little boys and little girls that grew up reading Jules Verne about going to the moon went to the moon. It's no coincidence that the little boys and little girls that grew up watching Star Trek, now we literally have replicators. We literally have data pads, faster than light travel. It's actually starting to seem more reasonable, these ideas that were just planted in our minds at such a young age are coming to fruition from people that grew up dreaming about them as real. Don't get me wrong. Hopefully the dread domains are not real. I have no interest in going into the mist. No. A lot of fantasy stuff. I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'd go there. No, miss me with the mist, though. Yeah, missed me. As Shelley said. Yeah.
No, but in terms of creating our own worlds, but also, Dave and I both have had a chance to work with WotC. Rivals, Darkened Wish, Black Dice Society, all the stuff that we're doing, but also getting a chance to kind of help and inform, seeing things in a better way, and realizing that representation is important.
Yeah.
And what we're co-creating along with the rest of the team. Because let's be real honest here. If this was just me, this game wouldn't exist. If there was not a team, none of this would be happening. I know my own strengths and weaknesses. But it's just the idea that we're being trusted by all of these people every week, and the team that we're working with, to bring them something new. And we have the keys to the kingdom. We can do whatever we want. I mean, within reason, it has to make sense, but there's no one going, well, no, that doesn't work that way. That's not what you can do. We can go, but we're in charge.
And fools really try it, by the way. We've had people be like, that's not a thing. And it's like, no, we literally dictate what it are and are not things.
Right.
Literally. Mm-hmm. Like if we're like, all these people have chlorophyll in their skin and don't have to eat food because they can, metabolize sunshine. It is that way because we said it is, which is simultaneously liberating, but, you also have to be careful because, things like power creep and game balance and all of that stuff does matter too. How do these things coexist in harmony with one another? But yeah, it's a fun process. Just the idea that we get to do this, not just for fun as a career, is mind blowing. Like Tanya said, even 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, if you were like, do you know that you could play D&D professionally? I'd be like, no. And you'll
and
get
people
to
will watch you.
Yeah, people will watch you do it. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I came up, during the Satanic Panic. I came up when it was geek stuff. You were just a nerd if you were into this. And the idea that now it's okay, that not only is it okay, it's actually cool. I'm like, all right, great.
Yeah. And the two of you are on the front lines of making that feel cool for so many people, right? I think that's really important. You mentioned the representation, Tanya. That I feel like has opened doors for so many people to be like, oh, it's all right for a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old who sees the D&D manuals and we're like, well, there's people like me who play this, and I watch them and I emulate them and I want to do that. But you're right, it is such a new thing, and I want to ask you this kind of as the future-looking question here at the end of this interview. There was all that talk about the film school nerds in the 60s and 70s who came up learning about cinema and taking this internal thoughts that they all had, and then kind of revitalizing what the film industry did in the 70s and 60s. What is it going to be like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years for this type of D&D, TRPG live stream shows? What are the people who are kids now watching Black Dice Society? What are they going to be making in 10, 15 years, and how will it evolve?
I think they're just going to blow us out of the water. There's going to be, knock on all the wood that we're no longer in a pan dulce, that, people are going to be kickstarting, setting up their own studios and creating their own content and doing all this stuff. And they'll be the young 20-somethings coming in and doing these amazing shows. And, hopefully we can finally, wedge out the people like, I've been playing D&D for 30 years, and if you don't play advanced D&D, you're doing it wrong. Hopefully those people will be long gone, if not out of the hobby. And, people like us, we can still be there. We can still be cool and be I don't want to say grandmaster, because that's like such a weird term. I know writing uses it a lot, like the Smoffs and the grandmasters of writing in the sci-fi spaces. But, we can be there and still making our own content. Nobody says you got to stop just because you get older. But I think, it's going to evolve beyond Twitch. I think it's going to be very VR. It's going to be other stuff.
Ooh.
And I just feel like even in 5 to 10 years, we're going to see people putting on their own events, building their own kind of, D&D-esque D&D empires, but with their buddies. And we'll finally get past that. This isn't something we do, because, I don't know about Dave, but so many people have told us from Rivals that seeing all of you every week made me feel like I belong. And I want to get to a point where if I turn on a D&D show, I turn on any RPG show, it's not the same 5 bearded white dudes. It's not the same, group of people that having some melanin on screen is not a shocking thing to people, and we don't have to deal with if you're black, you got to be a drow. If you're a woman, you got to be a healer. And we just get past that. More shows like Rivals where we put on a good show and we happen to all be people of color, not we're the black version of Critical Role, which people always come to us as. They're like, oh, I want Critical Role but black. And it's like Rivals. And I'm like, well, we're not the only show out there. We're just an official show. But you do realize that being official doesn't put us above anyone else. But I want us to not be the anomaly anymore. I want us to not be the one show where people can go, look, they're official and it's all brown people. I want us to be very common in 5 years. And also just want Rivals to be at the level of Critical Role. I have no shame in saying it.
Hey, man.
Nor should you.
I think it's kind of going to follow a similar trajectory in the MCU. I think we're seeing the kind of geek content that we're seeing now is you've got people that grew up with it, loved it, and take it seriously. And so there's people that will only have ever known this as a fun thing that was free from stigma from the beginning, and were free to act on that and create from that place. And it's true, in 10 to 15 years, I intend to still very much still be in the game. if I haven't been swept away into the mist. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to it. And I think every time we go out there, we show every little kid anywhere, and even some people that aren't so kids anymore, that they can do this. Like if you want to play, if you want to stream, it can be done. Get your friends together, start, you'll suck at it, get better. And that's it. Wash, rinse, repeat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice for all creative endeavors out there, but especially this one, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And don't think that you've got to be like a teenager to start, because I got no shame in saying it. I didn't start this till I was in my 40s.
I was a full-grown adult when I started.
I've been playing D&D for 30 years, but everything I've done that you know me for was after I was 39 years old. Yeah.
There's been a lot of that going around on the Twitters.
Happens.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Yeah.
This might spoil things, but I'm just very curious, Dave. Are you going to tinker around with creating your own domain?
Perhaps.
Okay.
That ball is already rolling for eagle-eyed observers of the show.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait for more of that horrifulness to... horrifulness? That's a word.
Yeah. Co-signed. You said it on the internet. It's canon.
It's real. It's real now. You guys are amazing, both of you. It's so great to have you collaborating together on Black Dice Society and Into the Motherlands and all of this amazing stuff. You said it already at the beginning, Dave, but what's the best way for people to watch Black Dice Society, get in, as well as follow you? And then we'll go to you, Tanya.
Thursdays, 4 p.m. Pacific on D&D, Twitch, and YouTube. And all the episodes are up on YouTube and as podcasts, wherever you get your podcast content. Also, we have a Patreon, Black Dice Society Patreon, where we've done bonus episodes, bonus content, all sorts of dope stuff. And I'm at B. Dave Walters. Follow me there to find all the stuff that I'm up to. I don't expect you to keep up with it. I barely can, and I'm there for all of it.
All right, what about you, Tanya?
I'm cypheroftyr everywhere on the internet. So other than finding me with B-Dave on the Black Dice Society on Thursdays, you can find me on Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Central for Rivals of Waterdeep. This is our 10th season. And if you're not caught up by the time this airs, Masood felt like he was trying to kill us in our first episode. It was bad, but in a fun way. I was like, Selise is supposed to be not this squishy. What's happening? And then Wednesday nights, come over to my channel for Into the Motherlands. We are, we're in the back half of our second season, brought to you exclusively by Twitch.
That's awesome. And we've got the 100th episode of Rivals of Waterdeep coming up soon, which is a huge milestone.
Yep. 10 seasons.
10 seasons. I mean, and Greg knows that at some points, every season we're like, okay, let's send this email. Let's see if they give us another season. And we're still here. And knock on wood, we'll see what Masood has for us. Hopefully he doesn't make our 10th season all our characters last season. And maybe we can try to bring back some familiar faces.
That'd be awesome. And I love that you can be in syndication now, right? You're going to get those sweet residual checks for 100 episodes.
I'd just like to say here, since we're among friends, Freely's never been on Rivals of Waterdeep, but I brought Selise onto my show, Darkened Wish. That's all I'm saying. Just putting that out there. Just saying that.
Oh,
just like,
Okay, so we should talk after this as well. You're not slick.
You saw it all happen in real time, everybody. Watch and follow all.
Maybe season 11. Maybe season 11.
So Masood, when you see this, you and Dave will talk.
Thanks both of you for coming on. This was fantastic.
You are both the best. Love you guys.
I've missed you both. Missed your faces.
I know.
Yes.
D&D Live 2022. It's gonna happen.